So recently I bought this Chessable course by international master Lawrence Trent, where he advocates playing b6 in response to everything white does. Sounds simple, sounds pretty cool. And this had been on my wish list for a while. And so when I saw it for £17.99 British sterling, 40% discount, LifeSquares doesn't pay full price for anything, I thought, wow, that's a steal, let's grab this. And so I bought it, I studied it, and it was far more interesting than studying some endgames. That stuff is so boring. And so in this video, I'm going to go over my thoughts on this game from the perspective of an amateur, intermediate, if you want to be generous. However, before we do, you might be thinking, wait a minute, LifeSquares, aren't you that guy that says in response to e4, just put a pawn in the center, play e5, let your opponent do all their gambits, traps, learn the refutation lines and crush them? Sure, I love e4, e5 games. However, I just don't want to eat vanilla ice cream for the rest of my life, guys. I want some chocolate, some pistachio, and I'll have some diabetic ice cream. I'll play a little bit of Caro-Kann stuff. And one of the practical problems with playing e4, e5 is that once you get past total beginner land, is the huge volume of quiet Italian games that you have to play. So after say something like knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, okay, the Italian game, I play knight f6, and I'm sitting there, I'm praying, please play knight g5, do the knight attack, try the fried liver. But they don't do it, they play this move d3, bishop c5, and they're going to play c3 and a4, and there's going to be all this queenside pressure, and this is some kind of positional harmonic game. I'm like, whoa, I don't have time for this crap, guys. I'm playing blitz at the bus stop, bus is coming. Gotta close the Chess app, open up Apple Pay, pay for my bus fare. No time for a 100-move game, guys. I want some fireworks right now. Which is something you really get in b6 games when I tried it out on a few test accounts. Because obviously you're going to put the bishop on b7 and you get a lot of fireworks along this diagonal. And so in this video, I'm going to give you 5 things that I really liked about Lawrence Trent's course. One thing I didn't like, let's try and be objective. But before we do, it helps to just understand some of the basic ideas around this opening. So after say something like e4, b6, they're going to take over the center. Principal thing to do, d4, bishop b7. The idea here is to put a lot of pressure on the e4 square or the e4 pawn if one is there. So as an example, let's say we have knight c3, e6. This bishop is heading to b4. A very popular move in the Lichess database is knight f3. Let's say bishop b4. And now this pawn is hanging. Okay, and so white has to respond to this, and the most popular move here will be things like bishop d3 and then maybe queen e2 in the future. And so that's the idea. And one of the things Lawrence advocates is not to allow white to just take over the entire position. So you have to strike in the center. So depending on the line, he'll say play f5 or play d5 or c5. So it's very important to try and strike in the center. Otherwise, white will just take over the entire position. Okay, so what was the first thing that I really liked about this course? Obviously, it's just b6 to everything. It literally is. So it doesn't matter if your opponent plays e4, we go b6. If they play d4, it's b6, c4, English opening, b6, ready opening, b6. And what you find is because you're conceding the center, many e4 lines transpose into d4 lines and vice versa. So contrast this with, say, preparing the Sicilian against e4 or preparing Queen's Gambit Decline against d4 players. If you're one of these people that doesn't want to learn a ton of stuff around openings, this is quite a practical weapon because you'll find that your workload is much less. Okay, and so the second thing that I really like about this course is the amount of tactics that are potentially available to you along this diagonal. And so as an illustration, many players are going to forget about a possible attack here on this g2 pawn and going to blunder a rook. So here's an example line. After d4, b6, c4, bishop b7, knight c3, e6, e4, okay, taking over the entire center, bishop b4, this pawn is now hanging, the knight is pinned, we have bishop d3, and now striking in the center, albeit from the flank. Lawrence recommends this move f5, and here, if you switch on the Lichess database, my favorite thing in the whole wide world, let's put up on the screen, what I find remarkable about this position is that it's been reached 215,000 times, and the second most popular move here is e takes f5. So about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 games go with this move, which of course is a complete blunder because after e takes f5, we have bishop takes g2, and of course white is going to lose a rook. If you turn on the engine, black is completely winning. It's not trivial, this game is going to get messy because after queen h5 check, g6 is a huge blunder, that would give the game back to white. So you have to go and play this move king f1, but if you essentially defend well in this game, the knight heads to f6, kick this queen away, you're essentially going to win this game. And so you'll find many variations like that or many opportunities like that in the database where white is just forgetting about the possible attack here on g2 and that this e4 pawn in many lines is just completely pinned. Okay, and so another thing that I really like about this course is that Lawrence allows white to be material hungry. So we give up a few pawns in some lines to gain the initiative. And what you'll find at the lower levels is that many players with the white pieces are just going to gobble up pawns, but they won't know that they're actually in a losing position. So here's an example. So after d4, b6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b7, e4, bishop b4. Okay, a sensible move here from white is to play this move f3. Okay, and so that blunts the b7 bishop. That's something you've got to get used to. And now we have this move f5, and we have e takes f5, so white is up a pawn. And now in the course, he looks at this move knight h6, which may look like a bad move because of bishop takes h6, but that's not a problem because of queen h4 check. And so after white deals with the check, we can recapture here on h6 and not ruin our pawn structure. And so bishop takes h6 is not a good idea. Instead, the most popular move in the Chess database is for players to play this move f takes e6, and now we have knight f5, so they're up 2 pawns. And here what they probably should be doing is playing maybe bishop f4, looking out for this queen h4 check, and then a possible knight take on g3. However, because they see an opportunity to just get a free move in, take this check, they take it. So we have e takes d7 check, knight takes d7, and now this position, although they're 2 pawns up, black is actually winning. It's about -1, 1.5 on the engine. And if we turn on the Chess database again, what's amazing is that the vast majority of players are going to play here queen e2 check, which is not the best move in the world. And so after queen e2 check, you can play this absolute gangster move king f7. I love moves like that. I love it when it's a kind of wild game where pieces are just flying about. And here, for sure, many players are just forgetting about the fact that if a rook slides here to e8, they are going to lose their queen. Obviously, it's pinned because of the king. So the fourth thing that I really like about this course is that the author is quite pragmatic with dealing with people who are just going to close the entire position. So after say something like e4, d4, bishop b7, bishop d3, e6, queen e2, d5, many players in this position, if you look into the Chess database, they're just going to play e5. And now there's tons of games like this, and what you essentially have is this bad bishop. And there's many ways to get this type of lock position where this bishop on b7 is doing nothing. And so here he recommends very kind of practical solutions where you play queen c8. And the idea of queen c8 is that you're going to play bishop a6 and trade off this bishop. White's light square bishop in this position is too powerful, right? Especially if you're going to castle short, it's eyeing up this h7 square. And so if we follow this line through, we have knight f3, c5 striking the center. Very, very important thing. Remember that. We're going to play either f5, d5, or c5. We've got a challenge for the center. So we have c5 here, c3, bishop a6, castles, knight e7, knight a3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and now knight f5. And you can see that the threats along this diagonal have been removed. Okay, and so a fifth thing that I like about this course is that when you look into many of the lines, you just find that white just blunders a pawn. So they're not really paying attention to what's going on at e4. So I'll show you an example. After e4, b6, d4, bishop b7, knight c3, e6, knight f3, bishop b4. Okay, this pawn on e4 is hanging. And if we turn on the Chess database again, so let's go and put that back on the screen, you can see that this position has been reached almost 4 million times in the Chess database. And amazingly, 1 million games went with bishop d2. It might be a gambit of sorts. However, after bishop d2, let's look into that. The author just recommends bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, and now we have bishop takes e4. And okay, if you turn on the engine, it's about -1. Black is just playing with an extra pawn. And there are many situations like that when you look into the database where white is just kind of blundering a pawn. So you get these kind of games where you have pawn odds early on in the game. Okay, and so one thing I didn't really like about this course was how it deals with London system players. It just felt a little bit passive. He goes for some kind of hedgehog system. So normally when I face London system players after d4, d5, bishop f4, I like to strike in the center with c5. That's one of the top engine moves, if not the top engine move. And here white has to navigate carefully. White can make a whole bunch of mistakes. A schoolboy error here is to take on c5, and then after e6, they try to hold on to their pawn with b5, and we have queen f6. The bishop is hanging, the rook is hanging. There's no way to save them both, and white is in a lost position. However, if you look into the way he deals with London system players, we have d4, b6, knight f3. Okay, delayed bishop f4, bishop b7, bishop f4, e6, e3, knight f6, knight e2, bishop e7, h3, castles, bishop d3. Okay, so that very typical London system formation. We have c5 striking in the center. We have c3, takes, d6, and now castles, knight d7. And if we put this up on the screen again, so we open up the Lichess database, you can see that this position has been reached some 13,000 times. And okay, black is doing slightly better here. However, if you turn on the engine, it is a roughly equal position. However, it just felt in my kind of rookie mind that this was a little bit passive. It just felt like white has a lot of options and the game is a bit slow. But you can let me know with your thoughts below. And so there you go, 1b6 in response to everything white does, which keeps life very, very simple. Put a bishop on b7, try to exert pressure on the e4 square. Let me know what your experiences with this opening is if you play it. Thank you very much for your time.